I truly want to understand something. The war in Ukraine is still very much in progress. It's ugly, it's deadly. The U.S. continues to dedicate immense financial resources to the cause, and somehow the U.S. media appears to have almost forgotten about it. 2 months ago, you couldn't turn on a cable news channel and not get coverage of the latest developments. Where were the missiles going? Which territory was Russia targeting? Where exactly was the U.S. aid going? But not anymore. Even though the U.S. financial commitment has only grown, why are so few talking about where these U.S. dollars are going and what should we consider to be success in Ukraine, given the billions the U.S. is sending to the country? Today, Russia's foreign minister confirmed that they're looking to take over territory in southern Ukraine, a departure from the longtime position of the Kremlin that Russia was only targeting Ukrainian cities in the east. It is an ominous development. And it also may be the first time you're hearing about any of that, since the media has largely checked out on Ukraine. Now, the word Ukraine was mentioned over the last week on Fox, MSNBC, and CNN combined 602 times. Compare that with the 5,576 mentions of Ukraine during the third week, not the first, the third week of the invasion. The first week, it was way more than that. Now, obviously, there's going to be a decline of some sort. You can't expect to keep up the same volume of coverage for 6 months. But a 90% decrease in coverage while the battle is still raging. Is no one curious where exactly the U.S. taxpayer dollars are going? So far, the U.S. has committed nearly $54 billion in support for Ukraine. That's almost as much as the U.S. spends on public housing programs each year. About a quarter of that came in a March package passed by Congress. The rest was greenlit in May. So let's do what many others on cable news have not and take a closer look at where that money is going. $31.3 billion have been earmarked for defense. The rest, $9.4 billion, going towards a broader economic support fund, $7 billion dedicated to food and health care, another $6.1 billion being divided among a host of other categories, including refugee assistance and help enforcing sanctions. Taking a closer look at the military funding, $12.5 billion direct weapons spending, $8.1 ticketed for U.S. military and intelligence, $6 billion for security, another $4.7 dedicated to military supplies. Now, that's a lot of American cash at a time when Americans are feeling the pain of record inflation, among other things. Let me be clear. I'm not trying to say we shouldn't be sending this money. I truly don't know enough about where the money is going to have an informed enough opinion. But doesn't the government have to see some type of return on this investment? What exactly is the U.S. paying for? What accountability is there with that money? And I have truly lost a sense of just what would constitute some level of success in Ukraine from the U.S. perspective. Joining us now is Paul McLeary, defense reporter for Politico. He is one of the folks in the media who's been following the money. Paul, thanks so much for coming on the show. Really appreciate it. So,
sure, thanks.
Are there concerns about the money not being spent as it was intended, and what is Ukraine doing to try to assuage the United States, U.S. taxpayers about those concerns?
Well, the money is going toward mostly U.S.-made weaponry that is heading out from the United States into Poland, then they truck it into Ukraine. So a lot of it, the bigger stuff like the HIMARS, is a very precise rocket launching system that we've sent 12 already to Ukraine. 4 more were announced today. Those are pretty easy to track. I mean, they're big rocket launchers. The howitzers are pretty easy to track. We've sent about over 120 howitzers, 400,000 artillery rounds. So things like that. The United States has a pretty good sense of where they are. Okay. And the Ukrainians have, for a while, been saying to anyone who will listen, we're happy to show you where the stuff is going. We're happy to show you where we're warehousing it, where we're shooting it. They're using some NATO software, I guess, to do some logistics for it. So the Ukrainians are more than happy for anyone from the West to come in and audit their books. A lot of the bigger stuff that's very expensive, they're not going to be able to sell that on the market elsewhere. I mean, we would know it immediately.
But not all of it, right, is with regard to specific weapons where you can account for exactly how much it costs and how many you got. There's going to be wiggle room, right, with regard to some of the other aid. What is the U.S. government doing to ensure accountability with regard to all of the money being given to Ukraine?
Right. I mean, there's a lot. Obviously, the humanitarian bit is several $billions as well. I think of the $40 billion package, $20 billion was direct military. The other $20 billion was split up among allies and humanitarian aid. The State Department has programs. They've had programs for decades that track this sort of thing and keep an eye on it. We haven't heard a lot from state. DOD has been out there. I talked to folks at DOD yesterday, and they said we're not super concerned about the military aid. We know where it's going. We see the Ukrainians shooting it off. The humanitarian aid, it's a little bit more, it'll be slower to get there. It's a little more complicated, and it'll take a little more time, I think.
Well, are you concerned as a member of the media, right? So the Department of Defense says, yeah, we're good. We're comfortable with it. State Department isn't really responding, et cetera. But, typically there's transparency on this sort of stuff. Are you getting, as one of the few reporters who's actually focusing on this, are you getting transparency from the government when you ask for specifics on numbers and accountability?
No, there aren't specifics, right? And as I said, with a lot of the big stuff, the howitzers, the cannons, things like that, you can see them, you know where they are.
Right.
But there's billions more in small arms. I think we've sent 60 million small arms rounds and things like that are harder to track and might not even be trackable once they get into Ukraine. The U.S. government, I think they're just patching this together as they go. So there haven't been any IG reports. There haven't been any new offices set up like we had in Afghanistan.
Should there
would be scathing reports several times a year about what was happening to aid.
I mean, shouldn't there be? I mean, again, because the media coverage has faded so much, I start to wonder sort of who's going to be pushing the government for some level of accountability on where all that money's going. And it makes me nervous when one of the few people who is, meaning you, is telling me that you're not getting real answers and there are no answers on a lot of this stuff. Shouldn't that scare the heck out of all of us?
Yeah, I mean, I think part of the $40 billion package that Congress approved in May, there is a provision in there pushed by Rand Paul to set up an IG, to set up an office to keep track of this. It hasn't happened yet. Obviously, it's only a few weeks ago. As we all know, the machinery of government grinds slowly. Yeah. But there isn't one yet. Yeah, I mean, the shipments keep flowing, and they're going to keep going. I mean, this package, this $40 billion package, will run out probably October or so, at the end of the fiscal year. So that's a lot of money spent in a very short amount of time.
That's a lot of money.
Yes.
Well, look, Paul, keep asking the tough questions. We need specialists like you in media who are willing to push the government, to force them with some level of accountability. This is too important. It's just too much money for people not to be pushing, and it scares the heck out of me that those of us in the media, right, have largely forgotten about this, which is why I wanted to highlight it, and I wanted to highlight you, and I appreciate you coming on the program. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find NewsNation on your cable provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.